Hello everyone, this is Gary DeTonicourt from morethanasnapshot.com. In today's video, we got a new product that's come in, and it is the Canon R50. And today we'll do a little bit of an unboxing and some first impressions about it. If you're interested in Canon cameras like this and how to use them, it would be a good idea to subscribe to my channel because I'm going to have more videos about it coming soon. All right, let's unbox it and see what we have here. First of all, this is what the box looks like. All right, let's take a look. Of course, I've already unboxed it, but we'll do it again. Okay, so obviously it comes with the manual and the warranty card. And it comes with the little LPE17 battery. Next, we have a camera strap and the battery charger. And this is the camera body. I've had many Canon cameras over the years, and I'm really impressed with how small and compact and light it is, and yet it still feels good in the hands. All right, so that's the camera. And in this one I got a lens. All right, and this is the kit lens. It's an 18 to 45 millimeter RF lens, and it is f4.5 to 6.3. It's got image stabilization, and it is an STM motor, and it has a 49 millimeter filter thread. One thing you should know about these new RF lenses, there's a marking on the camera and on the lens caps. That has to line up when putting it on, or it won't go on right. Let's put it on the camera. Simply line up the two red dots and twist it on. In the M50, it had an actual physical lock you had to move. On this one, you can just turn it and it overrides like a little bump. And then you get into the 18 to 45 zoom range. And now you can use the camera and the lens. So this is what it looks like when you are using it. It does stick out a little bit further. And then when you put it away, it tucks in. But you can't use it until you bring it out. All right, the Canon R50 is a creator style camera. It's very small, light, and compact. Pretty much made for beginners, people who are learning photography, or who are just beginners at doing content creation in video. And they keep it very small and light and compact and easy to use for those kinds of users. More experienced people may want one for content creation because it does shoot vertical video, and it can shoot video up to 4K 30 over sampled 6K, and so the video quality is pretty good out of this camera. So let's talk a little bit about the specs. It is a 24.2 megapixel camera, and it does have an APS-C size sensor, which means it has a 1.6 times crop factor. So that means that the size of the sensor is a little bit smaller than full frame 35 millimeter would be. And therefore you have to multiply the focal length on the lens times 1.6 to get the 35 millimeter equivalent focal length to know what kind of lens you're shooting with. What's unique about this camera is that it only has an electronic shutter. Most of the time you're probably going to want to shoot it in the electronic first curtain mode, because that will prevent getting lots of warping and things like that in your image. But it also does have the full electronic first curtain mode, and I would just be wary of that mode if you're shooting any kind of action, because the effects of rolling shutter will cause things in your image to warp and bend. And the electronic first curtain mode will help avoid those kinds of problems. As we look at it, you can see it does have a little pop-up flash that you have to manually pop up. And in the front, you have a shutter button, an ISO button, a scroll wheel, the only scroll wheel for controlling your settings, a movie record button, a main function dial, and an on-off switch. Of course, it has an electronic hot shoe so that you could put in flashes or the electronic mics that don't require you to plug in a cord. Of course, you could still use a regular microphone where you do have plug in a mic cord, and it does have a mic port here. It does not have a headphone out port, however, so you can't monitor your audio while recording video. On this side of the camera, you can see that it has a USB port and it has an HDMI port. So it's USB-C so that you could charge it or plug it in while using it to a USB power cord. And you could also connect it to a computer through USB, and you can use this camera as a webcam by connecting through USB as well. And it is a mini HDMI out, so you have to be very careful when you plug cords into that so that they tend to be a sensitive port. You got to be careful not to break them when you use it. But you could plug into an external monitor of some kind or recording device. All right, that's pretty much it for the sides of the camera. On the back, it does have the Vari-angle screen, and it's a very nice screen. Indoors, the default setting is bright enough and it looks great, and it is a full touch screen. I found outdoors so far in the sun, it was not bright enough in its default setting, and I would have to increase the brightness to be able to see it well. For an inexpensive camera, there is a viewfinder, which does not come on all cameras in this class. And the viewfinder is very nice. It has good quality. And one thing you should know about is underneath the viewfinder, there's a little diopter adjustment here. So when you're looking in here, you want to adjust that up or down with or without glasses. This just adjusts the viewfinder for your eyes so that you can see clearly. All right, some other buttons on the back of the camera. We have this little star button, which can be used for locking exposure or for zooming in, depending on what mode you're in. Here we have a little grid, and when you press that and when you're shooting pictures, that's what allows you to change to different focus dots. And then we have an info button and the standard little scroll wheel settings here. We have a button for exposure compensation, for our drive mode, for manual focus or autofocus, and for deleting images. We also have a play button to play back images that we've taken, and we have a menu button to access the full menu that the camera offers. Underneath the camera, it does have a 1/4-20 for connecting to a tripod, and it also has a door that opens up and gives you access to the battery. It's an LPE17 battery, which is a relatively small battery, so you're going to want to buy some extra batteries. And it has one card slot for an SD card. You're probably going to want to have extra SD cards on hand as well, so if you happen to be taking a lot of pictures, you can have more storage. Now, one thing you have to also pay attention to is the door doesn't lock automatically. So when you close it, you have to manually click this little button into position to lock it. So overall, the camera does feel like it's solid, it's good quality. It is not weather sealed. It is not the toughest Canon camera that's ever been made, but it does feel good. It's nice looking, and it feels good in the hand. If you have big hands, your fingers may fall off at the bottom, but overall, for a small camera, it's pretty good. All right, this camera has an ISO sensitivity range from 100 to 32,000, and it can be extended to 51,200. Now, I would not recommend going up to even 32,000. On this camera, I would say probably ISO 3200, maybe ISO 6400 you might be able to get away with, but when you start going much above that, noise is going to be a problem. This is a good camera for decent lighting conditions. It's not really a low light camera. In the electronic shutter, you can shoot up to 15 frames per second for a total of 28 JPEG frames, or 7 frames for RAW. So the buffer is not very deep. In the electronic first curtain mode, you can shoot 12 frames per second for up to 42 frames in JPEG and up to 7 frames in RAW. I'll give you an idea of what that's like. Right now the camera is set to shoot in the high-speed burst mode, and it is set for RAW. So this is what it sounds like, and with electronic first curtain. So I got about 7 shots and then it began to slow down. Listen again. And then it buffers and then it will shoot again. So the speed is not bad, but having such a small buffer, it's not going to make it a very good sports camera. Obviously you could possibly get some shots in that first 7 shots of burst, but it's not super fast. If you did want to shoot JPEG, let me change it to JPEG so you can see what that's like. Now this is JPEG and electronic first curtain. So that was nice. We had a nice long run of JPEGs at a pretty fast speed. So if you did want to shoot some kind of action, you might want to try it in JPEG mode instead of RAW. You'll get obviously a little bit less quality, a little bit less ability to edit the photo later, but you'll be able to take a whole lot more photos. All right, now this will be JPEG only and electronic shutter. Now the thing you have to watch out for in this mode is this is when you could get some warping due to rolling shutter. You can hear it's very fast, and then it does buffer. You don't get quite as deep a buffer as you do in the electronic first curtain mode because it shoots a little slower in the electronic first curtain mode. Something interesting is happening here. My battery is dying. So remember I said this is a pretty small battery. This is one of the drawbacks of this camera and this small battery. I probably only had it on for about an hour or so and the battery's dying already. So you will need to have multiple batteries for your shooting. Of course, I've had it on continuously the whole time. This camera is capable of shooting in RAW, compressed RAW, JPEG, and the HEIF file format, which is a compressed and higher quality version of a JPEG. But in my opinion, I shoot compressed RAW because it gives you the advantages of a RAW file, and it doesn't take up as much space. And even though the RAW file is a little bit compressed, you don't notice any loss of quality in the file. As far as video specs go, this can shoot in 4K up to 30 frames per second, and it can shoot in full HD up to 120 frames per second. So the video specs on it are pretty good. There's no crop. It is oversampled 6K to 4K, so you're going to have nice detailed video with no crop. Now the camera does not have any built-in image stabilization, no IBIS, but it does have on some lenses lens stabilization, and there is software stabilization, image stabilization in the menu of this setting. Now that may cause a small crop when using that stabilization. This is a camera that you may want to use on a tripod or use with a gimbal because it's not going to be super smooth just from the stabilization from the camera. The resolution of the EVF is a 1.62 million dot EVF, and it does look nice when you look through there. It's nice and bright and easy to see and easy to use. I do see a little bit of blurring when you move a little bit. Not rolling shutter, just a slight bit of blurriness. But overall, a decent, good quality EVF. And honestly, we're lucky to get an EVF on a camera like this. So this makes this camera good for stills photography. Now, it has a 2.36 million dot screen on the back, which is nothing fantastic, but it is a decent quality touch screen and plenty good enough to do most things. The camera has 4,503 phase detect auto points for photo, and it has 3,713 detect spots for video. The autofocus sensitivity goes from -4 EV to +20 EV. Again, it's not really a low light camera, but you should be able to do all right with video in decent lighting conditions. It does have the built-in pop-up flash that you have to manually pop up when you need it. The sync speed is a maximum sync speed of 1/250th of a second. When deciding if this camera is right for you, you got to think about lens selection. Since this is a new kind of camera, these RFS lenses, there's only two of them, the 18 to 45 and the 55 to 210. Oh, there might be also an 18 to 150. So there's not very many lenses natively to it. You could use a regular RF lens. Problem with that is it's made for a full frame sensor and they tend to be more expensive. Although there are some that are not as expensive. For example, this one is the 16 millimeter RF, and this would work well on this camera, and I have tried it, and any of the RF lenses like this will work. There's also a 50 millimeter version of this same lens. You could adapt EF lenses. So if you have any EF lenses, you could use them on here and they'll work just fine. So that gives you a lot more options. The thing people are complaining about is Canon is not allowing third-party glass right now. So that kind of limits your lens options until they do, if they ever do. It will take the RF lenses and adapt EF lenses. Even though there's not a lot of RFS lenses, you still have options. All right, so I hope you get the idea of the basics of this camera and maybe have a sense if it's right for you or not. And if you want to learn more about it, I'm going to make more videos about how to use this camera and also the upcoming R8. It's just that the R8 has not come out yet, has not been delivered yet. They have a backlog of those. If you're interested in the R8, it is going to be sort of similar to this camera, but it's going to be a full frame version. It's going to have more options, although it will use the same battery as this camera. That will be interesting to check out the differences between this camera and the R8, and maybe even compare it to the R5, which really would not be a fair comparison. But anyway, if you're interested in those kinds of things, please subscribe to my channel and check out my website, morethanasnapshot.com, where I offer video training classes and Lightroom presets and all kinds of things like that. So again, this has been Gary D. Tonicourt for morethanasnapshot.com.